Our scripture reading this morning is one we have heard many times, and this is the time of the year where we enjoy hearing it once again. It is Isaiah chapter 9, verses 6 and 7. The people who walked in darkness have seen a great light. Those who dwell in the land of deep darkness, on them light has shined. For unto us a child has been born, unto us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulders, and his name shall be called Wonderful, Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. May God add his blessing on the reading of this word. I think it was Friday night. I was flipping around the channels on the television, and I came across the Walt Disney World Christmas special that was there at Walt Disney World. Apparently it had been taped just a few days before, and there were folks out, a great audience out there right in front of the big castle, which was all lit up beautifully. And the thing I noticed right away that didn't surprise me, because I'm used to it when I see something from Disney, is how happy everyone was. Now, they showed lots of pictures of the audience, and of course they're happy. They're on vacation. They're at Disney World. They're going to be happy. But the hosts were so happy. But what really caught my attention were the Disney employees, the dancers, the entertainers that were there behind the hosts. It always amazes me the level of happiness that those folks achieve. They look 10 times happier than I have been at my happiest moments, or I've ever seen anyone be so happy, so joyful. And that's great, because it is a Christmas special, and we wouldn't want a sad Christmas special. We want people to be happy, and it certainly fits in with everything else we see this time of the year. Here in this Advent season, because we have not entered the Christmas season yet, it is the Advent season. And during this season, for us, really starting at Thanksgiving and going all the way through Christmas and through New Year's, is for us this long season that we have. And there is, it seems, from Disney and from many of the sources we see on television and the media, this expectation of ongoing joy and happiness. Happiness throughout. That's 7 or 8 weeks of continuous happiness, and that is certainly a lot to expect. In fact, it's more to expect than any of us can actually achieve in our lives. That much joy, that much happiness, that is what it seems to me they're presenting to us as our expectation for this holiday season. It's all family and all friends and all parties and presents and fun and eating good foods, and that is it. And my worry, my concern is that some of us then feel set apart from this season. We feel out of step with this expectation of ongoing joy and ongoing happiness, because we know and we have experienced that this time of the year, especially this Advent season as we prepare our hearts for Christmas, can be a time when the light seems to be shining and highlighting those areas of our lives that don't meet this expectation. The parts of our lives where we aren't living up to all that we are supposed to do this holiday season. Maybe our house isn't decorated quite the way it should be. Maybe we aren't planning enough parties, or we are not buying enough presents, or we're not on top of things the way we should be. And that can give us a sense of guilt, like we are out of step with the Advent season. But this time of the year also has a way of highlighting whatever sadness is in our lives, whatever darkness exists there. Right now, things that are going on in our lives that are difficult for us, but it also has a strange way of casting its light on the areas of our lives where there are old wounds. Healing or healed over, but we remember them, and they can bring us some new pain, these old wounds during this Advent season, because we are reminded when we see the empty place that's there at the table. We remember the relationship that we have tried to mend with no luck. We remember the illness that's going on right now in our lives. Our attention is drawn to it. during this holiday season. Not only that, but all that we see around us can remind us of the extravagances we cannot afford, the bills we cannot pay. And here toward the end of this year, we are, many of us, reminded of the dreams we had for this year that actually will not become a reality. And all of these things can get us in a mood to where we feel out of step with this joyous season. As if we don't belong here, as if we are on the outside looking in. Well, it's not always the way it has been for us during this time of the year, this high expectation of joy. Well, what do we do about it? We people of faith, what do we do with the fact if we do feel like we're in some ways, and perhaps we all feel this in one way or another, a little out of step with all this joy, all this celebrating? What do people of faith do about that? Well, one possible solution, one common solution, and again, it's more from our world than we read it from Scripture as well. We have to figure out a way to solve this problem. Grief, sadness, misery, fear, it's all a problem to be solved. Any kind of suffering in our lives, we have to figure out the quickest way over it, or around it, or under it. Grief is something that we will not and do not like to tolerate. We often see this actually in our relationship with children. We want the children to be happy all of the time. It concerns us if a child is sad. It's not always been this way in our world, in our society. It wasn't that long ago when people viewed suffering, viewed sadness as an important component of life. Something that actually would help you become a better person, would build your character. Suffering would help you to become more compassionate toward other people. It wasn't something we wanted for ourselves, but it's something we saw the value in. But some will say, we have 11 other months to suffer, to be sad. Let's take this 1 month and forget about that suffering. Just push it out of our minds and not worry about it, because this is the time of joy. Well, I'm not sure where this expectation came from, but it certainly didn't come from Scripture. Just look at the Christmas story itself as it is presented to us in the Gospel of Luke and in the Gospel of Matthew. This story of Christ's birth reflects the reality of life. It reflects the ups and downs that occur in our lives. That yes, there is great joy, as there was on Christmas Day, but often that joy comes in the midst of suffering and sadness and difficulties. Let me just remind you of some of the Christmas story. There was an unwed mother. A long and difficult journey to a place far away from home and from loved ones. There was no room in the inn. There was a dirty stable. There was a vengeful king. There were murdered infants. There was a narrow escape to Egypt, and there were years spent there in exile. Yes, the Christmas story is wonderful, and we do tend to focus on those wonderful verses right there, the little part where Christ is born, and there is such joy at that moment, but it is surrounded by darkness. It is surrounded by difficulty. We don't just look here for that. We see that with the prophets as well. When Isaiah was writing the words I wrote today, the people were suffering terribly. And the best he could do at that moment when he was writing these words is say, don't worry. Someday it will be taken care of. Someday one will come to bring light into the world, to bring joy to us all. But we are suffering now. Just a bit of hope then. Just a few words there from the prophet. Well, let me tell you something you may not know or you may have forgotten. The season of Advent, the 4 weeks or so preceding Christmas, the 4 Sundays we have here to light the 4 Advent candles, that is not in Scripture. We invented it. It is a tradition of the church. And that's wonderful. It's great to have traditions. But it originally started not as, well, like we have it now. What Advent is sort of a pre-party to the Christmas. It's kind of the tailgating that takes place before the big game of Christmas Day. That is how we treat Advent now. But originally, it was treated as a way to recognize darkness, to recognize difficulty, to recognize that we have bad times in our world, and there is darkness in our world, but there's also darkness within us. There's sadness within us, and fear, and anger, and all of these things. And Advent is a time not to celebrate that, but to see it and to recognize it within ourselves. It was Advent originally a time of darkness and waiting. If Christ is the reason for the Christmas season, darkness was originally the reason for the Advent season. And there is something that makes a lot of sense here. That Advent would be a time when we would reflect on darkness. After all, it comes at this time of the year where every day between now and just a few days before Christmas, the winter solstice, the days are getting shorter and darker. And they will get colder as well. So this is the time of the year to reflect on the darkness that exists in this world and in our lives, the troubles that we may have. It's a time for us also to think about and to consider. And this is something I'd ask you to consider during this Advent season. It's what would our lives be like outside the love of God? What would our lives be like if Christ had not yet been born in this world? If we didn't have that knowledge, incredible knowledge of God's great love for us. Imagine that kind of darkness. But here, if we do then find ourselves in some dark place this Advent season, and we all will, I'm sure, at one moment or another, we shouldn't feel guilty about that. We should remember that was actually the original purpose of Advent, was to feel the darkness growing around us. And so nowhere is it written that we are to be joyful all the way from Thanksgiving all the way through New Year. That is not possible, nor would it be helpful to us. Imagine instead that we take at least a portion of this Advent season and use it for its original purpose. To reflect on these things, to reflect on the darkness of our world and the difficulties of our lives. To remember that in so many ways in our lives we are still lost in the darkness, and we are struggling to make our way through this darkness. What would that be like? What would that be like if that were part of our Advent experience? To be thinking and meditating on the deepening darkness that is around us. To bring up those things in our lives, to meditate on those things that are not the way we wish, the fear that is in our life, the disappointment that is in our life. What would that be like for us? Well, one thing that it would certainly do, it would ready us to understand the words of the prophet that were read just a moment ago. The people walking in darkness. The people walking in darkness, they see a great light. On those living in the land of darkness, on them light has shined. For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulders, and his name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. This is my hope for you today. This is my message that I hope you will take with you, and perhaps you can't use it right now, but keep it. Because it may be something that here in this Advent season you will eventually need. The message is this: don't let whatever darkness is in your life, whatever sadness exists there, whatever fear is there, whatever guilt you can't, for some reason, let go of, don't let that make you feel like you are outside of the Advent experience. Because darkness is a part of Advent. And friends, it is from the darkness that we see and recognize the light. When we live in darkness, that helps us to know what light is. And we wouldn't even understand light as well if it were always around us, if we never were in darkness. The darkness makes it possible for us to see the light. The darkness of Advent, this time of the year, if we have it, helps us to see and understand the light of Christmas. Sometimes we have to be in a dark place before we truly understand the light of all the good things that are around us that God has given us. I like the story, and remember it well, the story of Gerald Coffey, who was an American pilot who was shot down during the Vietnam War. He was in a prisoner of war camp in Hanoi for 7 years. And most of that time he was in solitary confinement. He wrote a book about his experience, and in one passage he was writing about one particular Christmas that he experienced that was particularly important to him. The guards there at the camp had given him 3 tiny bars of chocolate for Christmas. And the chocolate was not very good, but he ate it. But he was most fascinated by the wrapper it came in. It was wrapped, each piece was wrapped in a piece of foil. It was all beautifully red and shining on one side and silver on the other side. He was fascinated by these. He flattened them out on his prison cell, and then he took one and he formed it into the shape of a swan. He took the next one and he formed it into the shape of a flower. And then he stood trying to think about what he should make the last one into. And he heard the guards there at the prison. And they were celebrating Christmas. Many Christians in Vietnam. And they were celebrating Christmas that day with their families who had come there to the prison to celebrate with them. And he heard their joy and laughter. And he heard a little child, one of their children, playing with a car or a truck, he could tell, on the floor. Playing with it almost all day, and that made him think of his children. And whether then, at that moment, they were playing with their toys. And suddenly he was overcome with nostalgia and sadness and some fear as well. He took his last piece of foil and he folded it into a star. And he wrote in his book, how appropriate and how wonderful, my own Star of Bethlehem. He took some thread from his blanket, and he took some straws from the broom that was there in his cell, and he tied these little ornaments to those pieces of straw, and then hung them on a crack that was just above his bunk. And so they dangled there, those 3 ornaments, and he was able to look at them as he laid there in his bunk. And he wrote this. He said he was struck by the satisfying simplicity of that Christmas day. There was nothing to distract me, he wrote, from the pure awesomeness of the Christmas story. No materialism, no commercialism, no food, no presents, no glitz. Just me and the Christ child. He wrote, I realized that although I was hurting and lonely, so terribly dark, that this might be the most significant Christmas of my life. Sometimes it is from the darkness that we see best and appreciate the light. And what is it then about this remembrance? What is it about the darkness that we see in the light? Well, one thing we certainly see is love, and another thing we see is hope. Hope. That light lights up our world, and through it we see the hope that our loved ones who are gone, we will see them again. Hope that they are taken care of. They are in God's loving hands. Hope that there is an end, absolutely, to the darkness that we are experiencing right now. We are assured of it through the life of Jesus Christ. hope that we will find abundant life.